Hello, welcome to my channel. I'm Tiffany, a retired librarian turned homeschool mom. And in this video, we're going to continue with Addy's story with the big book. This is Addy's World, 1984, growing up in America during the Civil War. So this is a very large book. Over a little bit. I'll just kind of talk about the chapters here because this is hard to hold up. It's a very, very big book. It talks about Addy's World. It talks about North to Freedom and the escapes. It talks about the way it was in the South. It talks about the war. It talks about starting new lives, and it talks about a peek into the future. So definitely talks about the American Civil War here. We have, I think there's a thing on, talks about the long years of the war. This is a boarding house kind of talks about the boarding houses that Addy would have lived in, where there are people in the attic and people squeezed into rooms and kitchens and everybody gathering downstairs and the pivy outside and the outhouse outside, and people still had the pivies where they were basically it's a basically very similar to a child's potty. So they're going to the bathroom in a pot. Talks about children's toys here. Talks about quite a few things. It talks about some of the African Americans. This is Mary Todd Lincoln, and her dressmaker was African because she was, talks about the fashion. I wish they don't actually, I don't think she has a fashion set, unfortunately. It talks about a wealthy black family, the Fontaines. And then, let's see. It talks a little bit about religion and how you see some of the big slave quilts here. How the whites used religion to further enslave their slaves and try to get their African religions out of them, not quite being able to do so. Talks about music. It talks about what happens after the Reconstruction, a little bit about the Ku Klux Klan, and how things changed and people left and went out west afterwards, and a few other things. So it also talks about the plantation life as well. The one thing, this is a great book. There's lots of information in here. The one thing I will say is that when it talks about plantation life, it talks about the cotton plantations. And Addy didn't live on a cotton plantation. She lived on a tobacco plantation. And they don't touch on that. And that kind of saddens me because as somebody who grew up in the United States, all you hear about slavery mostly is the cotton plantations. You don't hear about the sugarcane. You don't hear about tobacco. I do believe they also did indigo. You don't hear about a lot of the other stuff that they were used for building and everything. Addy's father was a carpenter, and they don't really talk about the other jobs. It's very much cotton, and nothing but cotton. And again, that's brought up here. So I wish they would have gone into that a little bit more. It does talk about a lot of the laws. It talks about some of the toys they would have had, how they lived, the Fugitive Slave Act, which is one of the things that really incited the American Civil War. This was when laws were passed where bounty hunters or slave owners could come into the North and take their slaves back. And a lot of people in the North where slavery was illegal did not like this at all. So this was along with Uncle Tom's Cabin, which was written for white people to make black people not seem dangerous, which was, of course, what the narrative was. It was that the black men were going to attack the white women, and I don't know what they were doing about the black women. I honestly, maybe they were enticing the men. I think that's what it was. So, and unfortunately, I think there's a lot of issues with that these days, where little black girls are over-sexualized, which is disgusting. But moving on, that is really what this book is. Again, like I said, I wish they would have gone more into the tobacco plantations because that was Addy's story. It talks about the churches and the schools and the education, a lot of the famous people. It does touch on Harriet Tubman as well. I covered the most recent film on her couple of months ago when I did Cecile and Marie Grace, because I didn't have a lot of stuff to do with them, because that was slightly before the American Civil War and in New Orleans, and there was just not a lot of information going on there. So I was scrounging. So I did talk a lot about the Underground Railroad in there. But again, fantastic book, great read, a lot of information, a lot of great history in here. They does also talk about it doesn't quite talk about Juneteenth because obviously that wasn't a national holiday. It does talk about they celebrating the Emancipation Proclamation, which happens, of course, at the end of Addy's book, where she's saying that, where she does that big speech on there. So, fantastic book. Again, wish they'd done something on tobacco rather than cotton, but that is it. That is it for this video. If you like what you see, be sure to like and subscribe. Leave a positive comment, and if you have one, and help this little channel grow. Yes, it's my hobby, but I do in fact love doing it. So that is it. I'll be finishing up Addy, and then we'll make the massive jump into 1904 with our nice little wealthy Samantha. So, but again, thank you, and I will see you next time.